Good. There we go. All right. Let's try this again. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our How to Win an ADDY webinar today, hosted by AF Los Angeles. My name is Chris Degnars. I am the president of AF Los Angeles, and I'm joined today by Erica Coates, president of Motion, an award-winning agency based here in Los Angeles, as well as Meryl Gardner, who is their awards manager and creative operations manager. If I'm going to botch that, I apologize now. Awesome. Thank you again. Let's go ahead and dive into today's session. We're going to spend the first 30 minutes or so going through a handful of pre-selected slides that we feel will really educate everyone on how to actually win an ADDY, which for those who are not aware is the award that is given out through the American Advertising Awards. And then we'll dedicate the last part of today's webinar to go through the Q&A, and feel free to drop in your questions throughout the webinar right in the chat function, and we'll get to all of those at the very end of it. With that said, we'll go ahead and pass it over to Erica to go through what we will cover today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us, and we hope that be very informative for you. So just a brief overview of what we'll be covering today. First, we'll talk about how the American Advertising competition actually works, entry dates and deadlines, specific to the Los Angeles chapter, but overall, the timing should be, I know there's a couple of folks from other markets, but the timing should be very similar. Criteria for considering an entry. We think this is very important for you all to understand. How to prepare your entry, building an internal timeline for your agency. For those of you in Meryl's role, you know how difficult that might be to wrangle all the cats we call creatives. And what judges look for entries. We'll be giving you a little insight into that. And then we'll save some time at the end for a little Q&A. So how it works. So the American Advertising Awards are probably the only competition that have 3 levels or 3 tiers of competition. First, it starts at the local level with your local chapter. And tier 1 of that competition, the gold ADDY winners automatically move on to the district competition. And a select ADDY winners have the option to move forward. Every local chapter has a different process for that. So definitely check in with your local chapter to get the details on how a silver winner moves on. And then you move on to the district level. That's tier 2 of the competition. All the gold ADDY winners from the district competition move on to the national competition. And then there's the last and final national competition, that's tier 3. The winners are announced in June at the National Advertising Awards Gala. And there actually are 3 levels of winners at this round. So you'll have gold, silver, and bronze all recognized at the national level. And for good reason, because even the bronze winners have gone through some strict and tough competition to get recognized at this level. So now I'll briefly go over some of the Los Angeles deadlines and fees. The first is the early entry deadline, which is January 5th of 2024, right at 11:59 p.m. Entries are currently open. They've been open since late October. So hopefully this isn't the first you're learning of the deadline, but you still have plenty of time. And the final entry is January 22nd of next year, also at 11:59 p.m. And the fees for the professional competition, early entry, if you remember, you can see you get a pretty significant discount. If you're a non-member, it's $225 per entry. And if you're a member, there is no late entry penalty, but the pricing does go up by $50 for the late entry. And we also have a student competition and different tiered pricing for student competition entries. Early entry for members is only $40 and $55 for non-members. And again, there is no late entry penalty for members, and it's a $75 dollar fee for non-members.
Yeah, so
Now I'll pass it on to Meryl, who will go over some other criteria and information on submitting your actual entry.
yeah, so for the criteria for considering your entries, so at the national level, which we know you're all probably aiming to win at, there are certain qualities that are recognized across winning entrants, and we've just listed some of the most prominent ones out for you here. So, highly creative and unexpected, fresh for the brand and for its genre, highly innovative, very clever, humorous, smart, sophisticated humor is also a prominent factor in a lot of the winning entries, and having a deep understanding of the audience that's being targeted in the work is also a really prominent factor in winners. So, tips for your entries as well. At the national level, winners can be viewed on their website. So, definitely go and check out that site and what's won at nationals as of recent. So we always suggest to study what work has won in the categories in the years before that you might be considering. To review those winners, it helps give you a sense of what are the current trends within those categories, and determining whether you think your work will fit into the same ranks of the winners within those categories, and review the agencies similarly as well that have been placing in the competition as of late, and who those companies are, if they're competitors of yours, if they have some other work that you're aspiring to get into as well, where you fall within that mix is also very helpful to know and to understand for the categories and work you're looking to submit. And then what seems to be resonating in the ad world as of current, what are the trends? What of your work exemplifies those trends and stands out from the trend in a good way? What about your work will really stand out is important as well.
Mhm. Yeah, some of the trends we've been seeing is purpose-driven work, or work that celebrates diversity from various different forms, using uh, the medium or platform in different ways. And so just keeping that all in mind. And then sometimes, like, Meryl's sharing, if your work doesn't fit within the trend, that's can also be a good thing, right? Because you're showing that you're being innovative.
Yeah, completely. So, how to prepare your entry. Definitely take the time to review the specifications of the categories. Definitely make sure that your work qualifies in those categories. It's also very helpful to get into the platform early to start seeing specifically what's needed for your entries and just double check that everything qualifies the way you intend it to. And to be strategic with your entries is a big tip I like to give as well, to make sure that you're submitting work that fits best within the categories that you're choosing. You don't necessarily want to just submit in categories your work qualifies in, but work or categories that your work really stands out in, that your work will shine in and stand out against your competition. So just being very intentional about the categories, and very critical of the categories, and ensuring that you're considering what your competition might be and that your work is going to stand out amongst the competition. So it's a big tip we like to share as well. And then, yeah, building your internal timeline. Definitely don't wait until the last minute to submit your entries. Get into the platform early so that you don't have any surprises as to what you might need. Stay on top of the deadlines. It's great to sign up for newsletter alerts. Anything that's available is always really, really helpful to catch dates you may miss, and adding anything to your calendar as well. And then, submitting your entries early can also be really helpful. There's a lot of competitions this time of year that are open, or that are opening and that you're planning for. So if you can submit early, you can save some money on that, and maybe even submit even more entries. So it's something we try to do too. It's always helpful to get in early. Yeah, so those are our big tips.
So now we'll open the floor for Chris to give us a little insight on what judges look for.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. So what is it that judges look for? This is always the big question that everyone has for the competition. So just a couple key things that I have kept in mind as a judge historically. The first and foremost is, does it follow the rules for the category that it's submitted in? And this goes back to Meryl's earlier comments about making sure that you review the rules for the categories. These can change year to year, so it's always good to double check it, make sure that there isn't anything changed. We make it pretty easy, or National makes it pretty easy in the rule book to see any changes because they'll be highlighted in red text. So you can easily skim through it and understand what any changes were. But this is a really, really important one. I can't tell you the number of times that I've gone through judging processes and seen it enter just in the wrong category. And, we're in a difficult position as judges that all we can really do is let the local chapter know that there's an issue with it. And it's up to them to determine if it disqualifies or if they're going to reach out to you and ask you to change the category. This is chapter by chapter, so it gets very difficult. So highly, highly recommend making sure that you enter it in the right category from the beginning and cover those rules. The next one is it creative? And obviously creativity is a bit subjective, but this competition is all about creativity. As hopefully some of you are familiar, in our rules, we state that no case studies are supposed to be submitted, aside from it being an anonymous submission. So you shouldn't be including your agency branding and stuff unless it's a self-promoted category or the self-promotion category. All the other ones should be submitted without any white label or label watermarks on it or anything like that. And it's important that you're not uploading the results, because at the end of the day, what we're looking at is the creativity of the entries. And this is quite unique compared to a lot of other competitions. So making sure that you're entering those pieces that are really highlighting the creativity is important. And then, does it spark emotion? Obviously, we're not judging it solely on emotion, but it does change a judge's mindset when they see something and they feel something. And just like consumers or, a viewer is going to experience it, we try to put ourselves in that viewer's experience. So if we're looking at social media content, we're assuming, someone scrolling passively on social media, what is going to grab their attention and get them to stop. If it's a video or commercial, is it sparking emotion? Is it making me laugh or cry? And I'm not kidding here. I have cried while judging the American Advertising Awards. There are entries that are that moving and that emotional. And it does, favor itself. It does help really stand out for a judge to feel something and feel that connection. So definitely recommend, as you go through your, various creative that you could be submitting, to think about what is going to move the needle, what is going to move the emotion and make the judge feel something a little bit more than just being sold to in a way. So those are really kind of the key things that I would say to keep in mind when going through your entries and thinking about what it is that a judge might be looking for in your submissions.
And now we're in our Q&A portion
Sweet.
of the set. It looks like we have a few comments.
Yeah, so I see, Tina, you left a message in your chat or in the chat about social media campaigns under the online and interactive category, the best way to represent that. I would, yes, agree, uploading a screenshot of it. And if it's a video, uploading either a screen recording or you could do a screenshot. And a lot of these fields have an ability to upload additional creative. So what I would do is upload the screenshot as your primary piece of entry, and then upload the video. If it is a video, upload that as a secondary media file. This way, the judge could actually see both options. A screen recording would be best if possible, but alternatively, you could upload the media separately. We can go ahead and use the chat, or if anyone wants to raise their hand, we can do live actual audio Q&A to make this a little bit easier. I know you guys have questions. There's no way that there's no questions. If there are, then I expect everyone in this group to be winning some national ADDYs next year.
Just speaking up for AAF Austin here, I appreciate you guys having us on the call. I know there was a lot of questions coming into this that I think our group probably had answered through the initial discussion. So thank you guys for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Chris and Erica, what are some of the most common mistakes that is either judges or entrants? Is an entrant something you wish that you wouldn't have repeated, or as a judge, something where you're like, if someone had only known this, they probably would have gone from consideration to recognition?
You want to take that, Chris?
Yeah, I can speak to it on the judges, although I'm very curious, I think, to your point, Mark, on the entrant experience that you guys have had as well. From the judges, I would really say a lot of it goes back to those categories and making sure that you're submitting it in the right one. And I'm hitting that hard on the head because it's a bummer as a judge to see a really great piece of work and then see that it was entered in the wrong category. And now I have no choice as a judge but to, essentially disqualify it or let the local chapter know and to them to decide what happens next with it. I would also say don't get too bogged down in trying to do anything. What's the word? Don't worry about case studies, I guess is my point with this. And I know that's a bit counterintuitive to what I think a lot of other competitions want, which are very case study heavy or doing custom videos and custom work just for the competition itself. To me, what makes the American Advertising Awards very unique is the ease of the submission process, because we want to highlight the work that you've already done from a creativity perspective. So making sure that, when you enter that, if it's a campaign, upload all of the different assets. Don't only enter an individual entry. Do the whole campaign, because that could put you over that edge of, okay, this one entry did well, but if I saw a full campaign around it, I bet it would actually do really, really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Curious, Erica,
Yeah.
Carol.
I was going to say, to piggyback on that, sometimes with campaigns, especially if they're multi-platform, you've done out of home, you've done a broadcast bot, you've done some kind of social component, and maybe the out of home was the strongest piece. Just because it's part of a campaign, don't only submit it in the campaign category. You can also submit the individual elements of that campaign. And it gives you a higher chance, obviously, of being recognized, but also we all know that, all the components of a campaign aren't necessarily equal or use the platform to its best abilities. So I think increasing your odds by taking a look at the different components of the campaign as well, and considering submitting them separately in addition to as a campaign.
So Erica, just to play back to you, what I think I heard you say based on past experience, to the degree that your budget can hold it, you would enter two ways, which are your strongest individual components and then your strongest collection of something that equals a campaign, and both have a shot at winning. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there anything else you learned? Because I know you've entered in one. Is there anything, like, for example, you entered one that won, you entered another one that didn't? Have you ever done a post analysis to say, oh, it's clear why that one won and that one didn't?
Well, yeah. So for instance, going into the trends, perhaps we did something that creatively the caliber was exceptional, but it didn't leverage or it didn't tie into a current advertising trend. And we see that all the pieces potentially, we're all adhering to this trend, right? And so, I mean, sometimes you do great work, but it's just not the best in that category that year, and you have to be okay with that. An example on the flip side, I worked on a experiential campaign. This was some years back, almost 10 years ago now, and there wasn't really a good category, but it was at a prior agency. We really, liked our ADDYs, and so we took a chance and we submitted this experiential in a category, I think it was like one of the video categories, and we swept. So because the creative was just that moving, and so also sometimes you're ahead of the trend, technologically, or as far as platform, and that was the case with this experiential project. And so don't be afraid to submit it just because there isn't that distinct category.
It's awesome. Thanks, Erica.
Mhm.
One thought that just came to mind on the judges side of things, because I know print is a quite popular category for a lot of you to enter. If you're doing print, because judging is now all done digitally, and it has been for the last few years, starting with the pandemic, make sure to upload videos of your print entries. You're allowed to not only upload the actual PDF of it, but if it's a brochure, take out your phone and just record walking around the brochure and showing all angles of it. It doesn't need to be highly produced because you're entering it in a print category, not in a video category, right? So taking your phone, just walking around it. I've seen a lot of really great brochures created and a lot of great like annual reports and stuff like that. But when it's only uploaded as a PDF, we lose a bit of that experience. So if it's direct mail or something like that, take out your phone, walk around it, take the video so that we can really, as a judge, imagine as if we're holding it in our hands. Cool. Any other questions? I know that we had a couple students on too. Yeah, Davey, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. It's Dave with the AAF Austin as well. And just a question, just because as a co-VP for American Advertising Awards and leading the judges as the judges chair as well in that, do you have, I know you kind of gave some tips and stuff earlier, but do you have any other tidbits of wisdom or anything? Because I know there's a couple of our judges that are on this call right now. So just seeing if there's anything else for judges particularly that you like to point out aside from what you did say. And also in regards to open water, you know, some people will be their first time using open water. And is there anything that you wanted to point out from there or could point out from there that may help?
Yeah, great question. I would say on the open water side of things, and this goes for everyone, and Erica kind of touched on this as well. Go go into open water now and check it out and see whether that's as an entrant in your first time, you want to go through it and make sure you understand the different criteria, the different selections that you need to make as you enter things. Same thing for judges, go through it ahead of time and test it out just to see how that experience works. So make sure that, yeah, you really understand the software before you go in there. From the judging perspective, I think my best tip is to take time to do this and honestly like give the respect to the entries that they deserve. I think sometimes it's really easy as judges just to sit down and try and knock all of these, like all of the entries out or as much as you can in, you know, a single session. Take breaks throughout it and like, yeah, let your mind kind of rest because the fatigue is real. Especially if you're judging, I don't know for Austin how many entries you get, but I've judged a chapter that has had 600 entries, and it was one of the most exhausting experiences of my life. And I had to constantly remind myself to take that step back, let my mind, you know, refresh, go out for a walk, and then come back and get back into it. So give yourself enough time to judge all of the entries with, yeah, the time that they deserve.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I will say for the judges that are on for AAF Austin, we haven't hit 600 entries yet, but if we do, I'll be excited. So
Cool. All right. Any other questions? I was going to mention I saw a couple students register for this, so I'm curious if we have any students on that have any questions about the student competition.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, I know a lot of your advice is for, you know, the non-student sections, but I was just wondering if it is still consistent with the student sections or if there's any specific stuff that relates to students that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I think for the student section, what is unique for you guys is that it doesn't have to be work that has actually seen the world. So you can get really creative with it. And, you know, whether that's something that you're doing in your free time, something that was a class project, you have quite a bit of flexibility with it. And as judges, we typically we know going into it that the students have this freedom to kind of do what they or enter work that is just, yeah, creative. You have that flexibility to do it. It doesn't necessarily need client approval, which oftentimes can bog, creativity down. And I'm saying that as someone on the client side of things. So really getting creative with it and have fun with it. I know, costs can be quite prohibitive in some competitions. So lean on your advisors for if there are funds available at your college campuses, which oftentimes they have reserved for you to enter. Make sure to, talk to your advisors about it and see what support they can provide. But otherwise, I think my advice for students is, enter the fun stuff and have fun with it because there can be some really amazing work that never sees the light of day. And if you're on the professional side of things, you can't enter stuff that doesn't actually see it unless you're entering a local only category like LA has, where it's a graveyard category for all the work that doesn't actually win anything. Good questions.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? I see, Tina, you asked about entries for the professional competition. It vastly depends on the market, and especially now coming out of the pandemic, it could be anywhere from 150 entries to 600 plus entries depending on the market and everything. So definitely recommend checking with the local competition to see what they've had. But it's honestly, even as the LA, like depending on what years you asked me to give you numbers for, it could drastically change, especially during the pandemic. Some common mistakes outside of submitting in the wrong category. I'm gonna actually toss this over to Erica and Meryl, see if you guys have any perspective on anything that you guys feel has been a mistake. And I guess this kind of goes back to Mark's point of anything that you guys have experienced before.
I think really reading through the description of the category, there can be some craft categories that may be confusing in their description or maybe duplicative. And I believe we have like a help desk email as well. So don't be afraid to ask, don't guess.
Yeah.
Definitely reach out and ask and get definition because, like Chris was alluding to before, the worst thing is to see a great piece of creative submitted in the wrong category and therefore disqualified, not because it wasn't, good work, just because it wasn't in the right category. So that's what I would say. I know a lot of people are concerned about asking questions or, seeming unintelligent because they can't figure it out. Always ask.
Definitely. And I would also say when you're making your submissions, understand that if you're entering an individual entry, don't submit multiple media types in that individual entry unless it's the example that I gave earlier of social media and you're doing a screenshot and then also providing the raw file. I've judged before where someone will enter, an agency will go in there, they'll enter for a campaign category, and then they'll also want to enter it in the individual category. So they'll just duplicate it and change the category, but they won't delete the additional media files. What we are told as judges to do typically, and this might vary chapter to chapter, but from my understanding as a judge, it's a national mandate. If you enter an individual entry, all we're allowed to judge you on is the first media file that's uploaded. So this is a really important thing. When you make your entries, make sure that that first media file is connected to the category. And this isn't necessarily entering in the wrong category. It's just if you do a campaign, duplicate your entry and the first file is a video, but you're entering it in a social media photography category, then we're having to look at it and say, well, you uploaded the video as your primary media file, and I can't judge that for this category. So really, really double check your work before you submit that entry because it could be fatal at the end of the competition. Cool. Any other questions? No? Take silence as golden? Well, in that case, I'll just reiterate what Erica said as well. make sure to follow up with your local chapters, with your local awards contacts, whether that's just through a contact form or if you have their email, reach out to them and ask questions. I think this time of year as a chapter president, I'm expecting a lot of emails to come in and a lot of questions to be asked. So don't ever be afraid to do that, because at the end of the day, we want you guys to win. It looks good for the local chapter to have a national winner. So as local chapters, we want to help you guys win. We can't be, give favoritism for it, right? We have to be unbiased with it, but we will always be there to help you and help you throughout the entry process. So don't be afraid to extend those emails or those outreaches.
I have a question actually.
Yeah. Go for it.
I know. So, yeah, I mean, I was gonna ask. I know it's like you were talking about more eligibility, but when it comes to like, say if it's like for the video category, it does equipment that you use when it comes to filming, does that matter in the category, or is it just based on the idea of the campaign and like, obviously the impact that it has?
It's a good question. Is this for professional competition or student competition?
Well, it would be professional.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. A lot of the campaign that I'm using, I mean, a lot of it is going to be like from the perspective of like mobile. And so, I mean, it's mostly like people with like iPhone 15s that are shooting this stuff. But I know the idea is having the idea right before we have any shooting done.
Is it are you using the mobile platform or
No, it's no, I mean, I'm saying the perspective of mobile phones it would be shot through like iPhones. I'm saying like
Oh, no, I
I'm just
understand
saying
that. So, case in point, I just recently saw a piece of campaign creative, and if we were judging it, as like a Super Bowl broadcast spot, against a bunch of cinematic entries, it would not win. But the whole premise of it was that it was supposed to be lo-fi, it was supposed to be user generated looking, and so from that perspective, it was a very effective platform in use of the technology. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, that makes 100% sense.
Yeah,
But there's also beautiful work, cinematic work that's been shot from iPhones.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think, like, we wouldn't look at it as a judge and say, oh, this is, clearly not a high budget production, and for that sole reason, we're going to give it a bad review. I will say, like, yeah, if the quality doesn't come out great, then, that's a separate issue, right? If you're shooting it on a iPhone 5, you would probably have a bigger issue with that. But I think if you're shooting it on a newer iPhone, it's not like we know as judges that it was shot in a specific format or using a specific device. We don't see any of the metadata like that. So yeah, it doesn't really influence it. As long as the concept is there and the quality is there, you'll be good to go.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a really good question, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I asked. Yeah, I just know, yeah, the plan for my awards are supposed to be shot on iPhone. Like the goal is to shoot anything under $1,000 for the camera.
Yeah. I think that yeah. Part of me would also say, if you're able to name the files in a creative way, and I don't think there's anyone on here from AF National, so I'm going to say this. If you can name the files in a way that helps explain like shot on iPhone or something like that, I actually think it leans into the like lo-fi, like this was the intention, was to come across as an iPhone shot commercial or something like that. You look at a lot of the Apple commercials, whether they're all completely upfront about this or truthful about this is probably a question for an agency. But at the end of the day, a lot of those say like shot on an iPhone right at the bottom of it. And I think that leans into the creativity that goes into a lot of these production, because you're clearly working on a project that does not have a, multi-million-dollar contract with it. Okay, so I'm just reading one of the questions that we got. What is the rubric by which judges are asked to judge a spot? How much is deliberated by personal taste versus AF guidelines? So the rubric is, I'll be honest, it is mostly personal preference as long as it follows the guidelines for it. So as judges, we are told that whatever we judge needs to be based off of the rules and categories. Beyond that, we're given a scale of 0 to 100, I guess, to judge off of. And then we're typically directed to judge from the 70 to 80 as bronze, 81 to 90 is silver, and then 91 to 100 would be gold. That's the rough kind of rubric that we're given. What I look at from my perspective is it creative? Would it resonate with the platform? What is the context of it? And is it resonating? So if you're shooting a commercial and you're then just putting it onto Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, right? Is that going to resonate? Is the video that same quality? Does it come across as contextual in those placements? And then what's the overall emotion that I feel from it? Do I feel like it was well executed? Is there anything that immediately stands out as not hitting the nail on the head? But yeah, with that said, judges are selected from their experience and expertise. So there's a level of trust that goes into it to say, we expect this judge to really understand our market. And I think that's one thing that chapters are getting better about doing with their judges is saying, here's our market needs. Here is what our market is about. So I judge one time in Northeast Louisiana, which was a very different market than Dallas or Austin or Orlando, who I saw we have someone from. So they actually provided me like a 1-page Word document that outlined, hey, here's what our market is about. We're all about creativity. We're all about these different attributes. These different categories are really popular for us so that we know as judges going into it what to expect and what to, take kind of note of throughout the judging process. But beyond there is a certain level of flexibility for judges to, see what makes the most sense. The last thing I'll say on this is that it is averaged out across the judges. So competitions, will range from 3 to 7 judges, depending on the size of the competition and how many judges that chapter wants to bring in. So it's always an average. So you don't have to worry too much about one judge coming in and just destroying you. Because we are told as judges, if you don't like the work, don't give it a 0 because then it diminishes every other judge's perspective. We're kind of given some parameters in that respect to make sure that there is equal voice being heard across all of the different judges. And then I saw, Mark, your question, is there or should there be a low budget category? I don't believe that there's necessarily a low budget or financial categories. There are categories for market size in some of them. So some commercial categories, if I recall, and maybe Meryl, you might even know this better than I do. I believe that there are some subcategories that say if it's in a market size above a certain population or DSA, then it can kind of determine it. I don't know, Meryl, if you know that off the top of your head either.
Not necessarily off the top of my head, but I do believe you're correct. Yeah, so definitely something to be looking out for.
Yeah, cool. Always appreciate the reassurance. All right. Any other questions? I'm liking this. Nothing? All right. Well, in that case, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up. I just want to, thank everyone again for joining. Thank you to Motion and Erica and Meryl for joining and being on today's call. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. We will be sharing this recording shortly so that you guys have access to it later. And definitely feel free to reach out to your local chapters if you have any questions about their local competition processes. Otherwise, have a great afternoon, everyone.